and the Indian Ocean is practically the most important stretch of water in the world today, simply because of the economies around it. You have Japan, you have China, you have India. That's 3 of the 5 biggest economies in the world around this Indo-Pacific. I'm going back to the time when India and China were once the biggest economies in the world. Sheer size. Indian ships used to sail as far as Malaya. They used to go to China. They used to sail into West Asia, of course, further down to Africa.
Great Nicobar project. It's been in the works for the last couple of years, and I think construction is set to begin very soon in the next couple of years, if I'm not wrong. It's a total project worth right now of rupees 75,000 crore. There hasn't been much chatter about this up until you had Sonia Gandhi of the Congress writing an opinion piece in the Hindu, and then suddenly it became a trend, and now people are trying to explain it, and some are talking about the advantages, some are talking about the sort of damage it will do to the ecology over there, to the tribes over there. Chokepoint tribe is one of them, they say. The Andaman Nicobar Islands have been a very big focus area this week, thanks to the opposition, which has raised complaints about what's officially known as the holistic development of the Great Nicobar Islands. It's simply known as the Great Nicobar Project, or as experts like Sandeep Unnithan have called it, the Pearl Harbor of India, or somebody else who said it was the Hong Kong of India. Because of the focus on this, I got thinking this week that perhaps it's a good time to explore that one massive domain that we haven't really done much on the 3rd season of In Our Defense, which is the maritime domain. A domain where I am a bit out of depth, pun not intended, because of the sheer vastness of the sea, of the ocean, and the sheer difficulty in terms of wrapping your head around how do you actually control the ocean, control the sea. To understand this project, to understand what else India has been doing on the eastern seaboard, we have with us Sandeep Unnithan. Hey Sandeep, how are you?
Good to be back, Dev.
Yeah, great to have you as always. Sandeep, are you a sea person? Are you a beach person? Are you a mountain person when it comes to vacations?
I am a beach person. I'm a sea person.
That's exactly what somebody from Bombay would say, like me, right? So,
absolutely.
Have you been to the Andamans?
I have.
Oh, lovely. I've always been meaning to go there. I haven't, unfortunately, yet.
Yeah, you should, Dave. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those greatest, territories that we should be so proud of, that they're part of India, I mean, there are such incredibly beautiful landscapes in India, in the north, in the south, east, west. But I think the Andamans is unique in its position and its geography and its terrain, topography, all of that, whichever way you look at it. It's closer to 3 countries than it is to the Indian mainland, right? And it's so far out there that when you actually land there, you realize that it's literally, you've flown something like 1,300 kilometers from the Indian mainland to come here to the Andamans. Yeah. It's a incredibly beautiful part of this world, and I recommend everyone who's watching this to try and make that trip once or twice in your life at least.
Yeah. In fact, quite often going to the Andaman Nicobars is more expensive than flying to another foreign country.
It is. It's a function of demand and supply, I guess.
Exactly. The other interesting aspect of these islands is its population. It's the fact that various areas of these islands are completely out of bounds for reasons such as ecology, for reasons such as certain tribes, some of whom have not been contacted by the world.
Ever.
None of them ever.
Yeah, they've been there in splendid isolation for tens of thousands of years.
Yes. And one of them, not linked to what we'll discuss today, but are the Sentinelese, which made worldwide headlines actually a few years ago, when an American missionary tried to go there and convert them to Christianity, and he was speared literally on the island, and his body still lies there because the Indian government decided it was too risky for people to go there to retrieve that body. In fact, if people want an imagery, we'll actually have a producer put it up on video. Yeah. But for people who are listening to us, I'll have a link in the show notes. Is a very iconic image. I think it was shot by an Indian photographer after the tsunami, where you have one of the Sentinelese people trying to throw a spear at a Coast Guard helicopter that was hovering in the area to sort of check on them. Are you okay or not? Because India has since long decided not to contact them.
Yeah.
But that person was trying to throw a spear at the
But
helicopter.
here's the thing, Dave. While those images may convey the fact that they're violent and they could kill you, which they will, of course, if you go to a certain distance. The fact is that they are far more vulnerable than we are, right? Because the kind of infections that we carry could just wipe out the entire population on that island. So in a sense, they're extremely vulnerable, and it's a good thing that the government keeps them that way, out of contact from all of humanity. But this is my personal thing, that we should study them in some form or the other, remotely perhaps, using technology, because they are a very incredible people. And if there is a way, technology allows you to do that remotely. If we can kind of document their life history, their culture, and preserve it for all time to come. So but that's just a personal opinion. But that said, it's an incredible feat of survival, of preservation, and the fact that these are some of the most unique Indians that we have. Amongst the 1.4 billion Indians, they are the most amazing race, and they believe to have been what humanity was in its original form when we exited Africa.
Exactly.
40, 50,000 years back. And that great march out of Africa, this is one of those lost tribes that actually stayed behind in that island. And so to study them would be a great thing, but of course not endangering them.
And the reason I brought the Sentinelese up was because there's another similar tribe called the Shompen tribe, which actually is at the heart of the controversy that we are about to talk about. But before we do that, Sandeep, before we talk about this project, we talk about what else India has been doing in this region. Explain the dynamics of strategic moves at the sea vis-a-vis land, because like I said, it's something that for me is very difficult to wrap my head around, simply because of the fact I cannot picture it. When I look at the map of, let's say, India, China, India, Pakistan, I can see mountain ranges, I can see yahan se entry hai, wahan se entry, I can see there's a road over, there's a rail line over there. When I look at a map of the sea, it's just blue everywhere. I don't know what is going where, and then you have these terms just choke points and sea lanes and stuff like that. So break that concept down for us before we enter this topic.
Well, Dave, the fact is that we are astride the Indian Ocean, and the Indian Ocean is practically the most important stretch of water in the world today, simply because of the economies around it. You have Japan, you have China, you have India. That's 3 of the 5 biggest economies in the world around this Indo-Pacific, if you can call it. The Japanese, of course, are a little further towards the Pacific, but it's China and it's India, and you have the Indo-Pacific. And you have this huge movement of trade, commerce, energy flowing through the Indian Ocean. It's just, imagine it as a gigantic oceanic expressway that's moving from the Malacca Straits near south of Sri Lanka and towards the Cape of Good Hope and towards West Asia. It's just this huge pulsing oceanic highway through which hundreds of thousands of ships pass every year. Something like 100,000 ships pass through this. 50 to 60% of the world's energy passes through this. Oil, gas, all of that, cargo. So what you're looking at might look blue for you, but actually it's pulsing red with the lifeline of global commerce. So it's right here. It's just below our subcontinent, below Sri Lanka. So it's actually the veins of oceanic commerce pass through the Indian Ocean. And that's why this stretch is so important. And it's always been the case. If you look at it, going back to thousands of years, I'm going back to the time when India and China were once the biggest economies in the world, sheer size. Indian ships used to sail as far as, Malaya. They used to go to China. They used to sail into West Asia, of course, further down to Africa. Chinese ships have been recorded as coming here in the Imperial voyages of Zhang He, the admiral. So it's been pulsating with trade and commerce for decades, for centuries, in fact. And today we are coming back to that old time when India and China were once the most prosperous trading nations. We are returning to that time where India is the 4th largest economy, soon to be the 3rd largest economy. China is, of course, the second largest, soon to be the largest economy. So the Indian Ocean then once again becomes really important. And it's not just trade, Dev. It's also important because of naval presence. Like, as you know, the PLA Navy is the largest navy in the world in terms of sheer number of warships. It has something like 400 warships all told. It has more warships than the United States Navy, which is a feat when you consider that the Chinese began their modernization just about 3 decades ago. Of course, if you look at tonnage, the US Navy has bigger ships. It has 11 aircraft carriers. It has 11 LPDs and, assault ships, amphibious assault ships and all. So it's a far more powerful Navy. But in terms of sheer number of platforms, the Chinese Navy is way ahead. So they're doing it because the Indian Ocean is extremely important for them. A lot of their energy passes through the Indian Ocean. They, of course, draw all their something like 50 to 60% of their oil, gas flows in through West Asia, and it passes through all the choke points around the Indonesian islands. Now, the choke points, as the terminology suggests, is a point that can be choked, which is why when you have this large number of ships then suddenly coming into this constricted area, that becomes a choke point. The Malacca is one choke point. It's just about 900 kilometers long. You have other such choke points around the Indonesian islands, Sunda, Lombok, Umbai Vetar. So that's a total of 4 choke points which connect the Pacific Ocean to the Indian Ocean.
Right.
So that's when these areas become so vital to global commerce, simply because they're so narrow and they're straits. They're literally surrounded by land masses on both sides. And of course, there is what the Chinese Hu Jintao once called the Malacca dilemma, right? How can we allow so much of our oil and gas to pass through such a short, small, narrow, constricted gap? It's like, it's that thing in why do you get heart attacks? Because your arteries get clogged, and they're always worried about the fact that if somebody stops their maritime energy routes, the Chinese economy could have a problem. So that is something that countries have kind of played on. The United States is, for instance, they did this to the Imperial Japanese Navy in the Second World War. They shot up all their ships. They destroyed all their, warships, merchant ships, and this whole Imperial Japan, which was actually a thalassocracy, which is an oceanic empire, just collapsed because it could not sustain these sea routes. It could not protect its sea routes. It could not sail ships. It could not bring raw materials. Could not make this thing. So it was a concerted campaign over 3-4 years using ships, submarines, aircraft, and this empire was converted into an island, and then finally it was defeated in 1945. So that's just about 80 years back. Now I see China trying to occupy the space that Imperial Japan had just about 80 years back. The resurgent Chinese economy, the resurgent PLA Navy, all of these factors are going to determine the geopolitics of the Indian Ocean region well into this 21st century. And that's everything that you see now, they're moving around, all the chess pieces moving around are in response to this very unprecedented set of circumstances, which is the rise of China. And as China rises, it becomes more assertive. It starts surging out ships, merchant ships, of course. It starts building alliances. It starts creating port facilities. It activates its friends, whoever number of friends that it has, whether it's Pakistan or Myanmar or North Korea, all of that. And then you will see countries around the region that are worried by the rise of China. India, for instance, the Philippines, Vietnam, all of these traditional countries which are worried that a rising China is a hegemon. It's a regional hegemon that could actually impede upon their economic progress, which will make them subservient, which will treat them like an empire treats its subjects.
Yeah.
That's the kind of fear that's playing in the minds of a lot of Asian countries. And if you see the kind of weapons acquisitions over the last decade, they are all made in response to China's rise. Whether it's Vietnam going in for submarines, now talking to us for BrahMos missiles, Philippines buying several sets of BrahMos missiles. They're going in for repeat orders. We've already sold them 3 batteries, and now we're going to buy, they're going to buy 3 more, is what we're hearing. Indonesia is as well very, unsettled by the rise of China. So the whole thing is that while China keeps trying to tell everyone, our rise is going to be peaceful and we're here to be good neighbors. But when you see the parades, you see the kind of, aggression on the high seas, most people aren't convinced that China's rise is going to be peaceful. So everyone's investing. They're building up their ports. They're building up their forts. They're building up their militaries. They're, hedging their bets. They want to ensure that they have everything ready in case China decides to muscle around, throw its weight around in the region. So what you're seeing in the Indian Ocean region, one of the most fascinating geopolitical stories of the 21st century.
Yeah, right. It's a fascinating answer, and I think that kind of explains something that I've asked you before when we've talked about the standoff along the LAC. Is that why does China in the first place feel the need to needle India when, like we've discussed, that a majority of its population is Far East, and there's no real threat per se on the borders. But I guess this is ultimately why, because the game actually is being played in the ocean, and this is just various pressure points that the country uses to sort of needle India.
So it's to focus, get our leadership to focus on the land frontiers, which is where you have the disputed regions, so that you don't look seawards and you continuously spend less. The government spends only about 16% on the Navy, vis-a-vis something like 60% on the Army. And the Army's relevance will remain, of course. I'm not disputing that. As long as we have disputed land frontiers, you don't have disputed maritime frontiers. But the maritime frontier is somewhere that you need to spend a lot more. You need to spend more on the Air Force as well. So, that's the state of play right now. And China is ensuring that you look landwards, because if you start looking seawards, if you start investing greater resources, then it becomes a problem for China.
But we're doing that. We're trying to do that. And that brings me to that Great Nicobar project. It's been in the works for the last couple of years, and I think construction is set to begin very soon in the next couple of years, if I'm not wrong. It's a total project worth right now of rupees 75,000 crore. That includes one transshipment port, which basically, if I were to explain it to my listeners and viewers, is basically like an airport that is dedicated to transfers and layovers, basically.
Right.
So
it's not a destination.
It's not a destination. You have goods coming there. They kind of get offloaded and then put into different ships and then sent to their actual destinations. There's a full-fledged airport that's going to come up. There's a power plant and a township. All of this will happen in the southernmost island of Andaman Nicobar Islands, just above Indira Point, which is India's last point on Earth. Now, there's controversy, obviously, like I discussed at the beginning of this episode, and we'll get into that briefly. But why do you call this, Sandeep, like you just did, the Pearl Harbor of India, and break this project down for us, actually? Because, while this has been in the works for a couple of years, there hasn't been much chatter about this up until you had Sonia Gandhi of the Congress writing an opinion piece in the Hindu. And then suddenly it became a trend, and now people are trying to explain it, and some are talking about the advantages, some are talking about the sort of damage it will do to the ecology over there, to the tribes over there. Shompen tribe is one of them, they say. So tell us about this project. What is it? And as a national security expert, why do you think this is a very important, crucial project?
Right. Well, Dave, I've looked at the project, I've spoken to a few people, and what my understanding is that this is the most important infrastructure project India has ever attempted in its history.
Okay. Wow.
In terms of the ability to influence global events. I'm not talking of a project on the Indian mainland. You have port projects, you have airport projects, you have military bases, you have strategic bases and all that. But none of them affects global commerce in a way that the ICTP does, the Galathea Bay project in Nicobar Island. Simply because of its location. It is astride the world's most important shipping strait, the Malacca Straits. I've already told you the numbers. It's something like almost 100,000 ships pass through there every year, and 13 million barrels of oil pass through there every single day. It has very sensitive location. There's Singapore on the one end, Port Klang on the other, Colombo at the third. But we've never seen India move forward with a project that will actually put us into the big league like this project. It's a global project. It's not just a pure India project. This is India signaling that we are going to put a project that's going to put us on the global map that will serve our interests when we become the world's third largest economy, the world's second largest economy in the next couple of decades. And this is a slow burner of a project. It's going to take several years to be realized, right? The first phase comes up in 2028. That's 3 years from now. And the last phase would be in 2059, right? That's more than 2.5 decades from now. So it's like, it's a very ambitious project. And if it's realized, it aims to make a Singapore kind of port for India, which is astride the global shipping lanes. See, the problem is that India is, we like to say that, we are astride the global shipping lanes and all that. But the fact is that flow, that highway that I told you, actually passes far south.
Okay.
It goes out of the Malacca Straits and then it comes down below Colombo and then it goes up like that. So it makes more sense for a lot of companies which carry these massive merchant ships to offload onto smaller ships, transship them, and then send them up to the mainland, Indian mainland. But here now you have an Indian port that's going to be right there, astride the Malacca Strait, just about 40 or 50 nautical miles away, which means that the ship has to make the smallest possible detour, touch over there, offload its cargo, and then continue down its path. And this is going to save, there are estimates which say that India could save something like $200 million in transshipment costs, which is what we pay other ports like Klang, Singapore, Colombo right now. We offload cargo destined for India onto these ports, and from there it's transshipped to the Indian mainland. But here now, for the first time, you have an Indian port. It's going to take time, which is going to be located there. That's the maritime commerce part of it. Then you have the strategic angle to this. Now, this port is going to be like a dual-use project.
Yeah.
It's going to have a civil enclave. It will have a military enclave as well. The military enclave is where you're going to have berthing areas for ships, warships, for submarines. It will kind of use the airfields around, of course, for air cover and all that. But it will allow India to base very large warships over there, like aircraft carriers, for instance, submarines. And you, of course, have to create, this is not something that you say it and it will be done. The fact is that it's so far away from the Indian mainland, 1,200, 1,400 kilometers away. So the port facilities over there will allow us to berth large warships, aircraft carriers, destroyers, submarines, and the like. And of course, the fact that you're located so close to the maritime choke points, like I mentioned, the Malacca Straits, Sunda, Lombok, Mumbai, Vatar, suggests that Indian warships can go closer to these choke points much swifter when they're forward deployed in the Andaman Islands than they would be on the Indian mainland. And a simple thumb rule thing would be a conventional submarine, for instance, if it has to sail from Visakhapatnam, which is the current port, if it has to sail all the way to the choke points, it spends something like 8 days one way. Whereas if it were located in Port Blair, it would cut down by 50%. It's 3 or 4 days to these choke points. So that economizes on, the usage of the submarines, on the downtime and all that. You save a lot of time, cost, all of that. And, it's the best place for you to be located in. So it has enormous commercial benefits, and it's a huge strategic project. I think it is possibly, like I said, it is the most important project that India has ever attempted until now.
Yeah. Wow, fantastic. That's actually, I didn't know about this, honestly.
Because it was flying under the radar.
Under the radar, exactly.
Yeah. And it was kept that way because you don't want to make a big song and dance about it, because when you start saying a lot of things, when you start, projecting all of this out there, a lot of vested interests start to get hurt.
Of course.
It affects several countries across the world, especially in the region and beyond. And they will have a reason to ensure that a project like this doesn't happen, right? It's pure market economics. And there will, of course, be people who would be worried about its strategic and geostrategic impact on the region, right? You don't want India to be looking far east, building up these very strategic port facilities, forward basing its navy, for instance. All of these have connotations. They make people uncomfortable, right? So we've been playing this game for almost 80 years, Dave. We're very happy on the mainland. No, we shall not explore this. About 20 years back, 25 years back, there was Admiral Bhagwat who spoke of a Far Eastern command, and immediately the ASEAN countries went into a flux. Oh, India's got great power ambitions and all that. But it's taken us so long to get here. And then finally, we've actually started pouring cement into those great power dreams. And we're doing it on our own territory. We're not going into anyone else's home and building. We're not reclaiming islands and building them like the Chinese. We're not doing it in the global commons. We're building it on Indian territory. We're doing what is legitimately on our own soil.
Yeah. In fact, like the way you've described this project, I wouldn't be surprised that when the first phase sort of gets operational in a couple of years from now, you'll have another standoff along the LAC because China's going to throw a fit about this project and not like what you're doing in the Indian Ocean.
Right.
The second aspect of this, Sandeep, the ecological aspect, the concerns over that. And this is not the first time a concern like this has been raised on a project that's being developed on an Indian island. I think 2 years ago, you had a similar controversy over a base that was inaugurated in Lakshadweep on the island Minicoy. INS Garuda, if I'm not, it wasn't. It was Garuda, was it?
Well,
Minicoy Island.
Minicoy was it Baz? No, Baz is on the side.
Under Nicobar Island. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point being, it was also that base was far away from India. It's actually closer to the Maldives than it is to India, and the logic is the same, I'm guessing.
Right.
That is just another side of the Indian Ocean, and you are trying
the Western
theaters, and you're trying to control the flow of cargo that's coming from down South Africa.
Yeah.
But this question then remains: where do you draw the line? How do you have that balance? Point number one. Point number two. Keeping this in mind, and also the fact that you've described this as a project that's going to take easily 3 decades. Do you see successive governments in the future? And I'm not trying to say it's going to be of this party or that party, regardless. Right. But because this is going to require a lot of investment, this is going to require that constant stay at it over multiple governments. If you say 2.5 decades, there's at least 4 or 5 governments, 4 or 5 prime ministers. How do you ensure that you end up achieving what you've set out to achieve?
Well, of course, the first part of your question first, the fact is that, look, projects are going to create some kind of ecological impact, right? There are going to be people who will be displaced, tribals. There will be forests that will have to be cut down, trees will have to be cut down. It might alter the flora and fauna on that particular island to some extent because it is a huge project. Lasting over 3 decades. So finally, at the end of the day, it is the cost-benefit analysis that we can continue to keep the Andaman Islands the way we are and be a third-rate power, or step up, make a compromise there and say, I do a cost-benefit analysis. I will reduce my flora and fauna on this island, for instance, by so much because it will give me so much more strategic benefits to not just my military, but also to my economy. And thereby, it would benefit more people on India than, say, this one particular island were if it were just left alone. So those are, answers have to be, those questions have to be asked, those answers have to be recorded. Now, the thing about the project, the political consensus, it is important. Because as you correctly pointed out, it's several decades down the line, and there needs to be a greater political understanding and awareness about it. There's one way of doing it is to build it in stealth and then present a fait accompli to whichever government takes over. But there is another way of doing it, which is to build up this whole narrative of how it benefits the Indian economy, how it creates huge downstream impact, how it generates jobs, how it makes India competitive in the world market. And these are things that we've never really done, and we've seen projects being derailed for exactly the reasons that you mentioned. The Sardar Sarovar project, for instance. I mean, as a young reporter, I remember covering, endless protests over the Sardar Sarovar Dam, and they said, it's going to create chaos, it's going to create destruction and all of that. But then if you look at it today, the benefits of the Sardar Sarovar project far outweigh the kind of so-called ecological damage that it caused. It's brought water to so many parts of Gujarat that were all parched and they were dry. There's agriculture going on there. So it's actually improved the lives and livelihoods of people. It's created jobs over there. And similarly, this is a project that could do the same, though not for people of the island, because there are very few people who live there. It is the tribals, of course, it's the flora, it's the fauna of the Great Nicobar Island, but it could create a lot more downstream impact for people on the Indian mainland, the other shipping and the merchant shipping, the cargo handling, transshipment, all of that is going to create opportunities for employment. And this, I consider this project as one of those things that we should have done a long time ago. And in 1991, for instance, when we began the whole process of economic liberalization, now that's something that there is bipartisan consensus on.
Yes.
You ask, even the CPIM would not want to roll back, liberalization, right? Everybody agrees that this is the only way forward. And similarly, this is actually a spin-off of liberalization, a project of this size, of this nature, not only for the economy, but also for the Indian military, for the Indian Navy, which is an arm of, which is one of only two government services that look way beyond India's territory, which is the MEA is the only other one.
Yeah.
Right? The MEA and the Indian Navy look far beyond our geographies. So it is a project that benefits us strategically and economically. And therefore, the benefits of this should be communicated. I'm sure at some point it will be done, but it's, better late than never.
Yeah. Right. We'll talk more about this, but after a quick break.
राजा को सीधा संवाद करना चाहिए जनता के साथ। तो भले ही प्रजातंत्र है, लेकिन प्रधानमंत्री राजा ही है एक तरह का 5 साल के लिए। तो सीधा संवाद है मन की बात, हम क्या कर रहे हैं। फिर वो कहते हैं कि यातायात के साधन इतने मजबूत करना चाहिए ताकि व्यापार संतुलित हो सके। तो रोड अगर ठीक होगा तो आपका माइलेज ठीक होगा, तेल बचेगा, आपका रिपेयरिंग बचेगा, सर्विसिंग बचेगा, और पर व्यक्ति का जो टाइम बच रहा है, आप 6 घंटे में हरिद्वार जाते थे, अभी 3 घंटे में जाते हैं, तो रोड के कारण। तो इस तरह की बातें हमारे शास्त्रों में ऐसी ऐसी जो आज पढ़ाया जाए, बहुत जगह पढ़ाया जा रहा है। गीता की ऐसी ऐसी बातें हैं। आप आज थियरी ऑफ रिलेटिविटी पढ़ रहे हैं, आज 4 डायमेंशन पढ़ रहे हैं, हमारे शास्त्रों में भरा हुआ है। आज आप बात करेंगे एटम की, आप कहते हैं कि एटम का आविष्कार और 3 एलिमेंट्स जो है इलेक्ट्रॉन, प्रोटॉन, न्यूट्रॉन का 100 साल या 110 साल पहले, 130 साल पहले किया गया, और वैज्ञानिकों को पता चल गया कि हर पार्टिकल में वो एक छोटा स्मॉलेस्ट पार्टिकल है जिसको एटम कहते हैं। एटम के अंदर इलेक्ट्रॉन, प्रोटॉन, न्यूट्रॉन होता है, न्यूट्रॉन और प्रोटॉन न्यूक्लियस में होता है, इलेक्ट्रॉन नाचता रहता है, और जो उसका न्यूट्रॉन है वो न्यूट्रलाइज करता है, प्रोटॉन है, वेट है उसका, जो आप लॉ ऑफ ग्रेविटेशन कहते हैं। और हमारे सदियों से कनाद ऋषि ने कहा कि परमाणु से दुनिया बनी है, हर कण, हर चीज़ में परमाणु है, लकड़ी लोहा सबके अंदर परमाणु ही है, और वो सब एनर्जी है, सब परमात्मा ही है। और उसके अंदर 3 तत्व होते हैं, सात्विक, राजसिक और तामसिक, और तीनों का गुण यही है कि एक स्पीड पकड़ता है, एक ब्रेक लगाता है, और एक बैलेंस करता है। यही ब्रह्मा विष्णु महेश है कि एक उत्पत्ति करता है और वो उत्पत्ति करने वाला ही बैलेंस बनाता है।
Welcome back. Sandeep, before the break, we've talked about what's officially known as the holistic development of the Great Nicobar Islands.
Yeah.
It's a massive project for a massive port, a huge airport, a township, and a power center, a power generation center. We've talked about, you've described the sheer vastness of it, how you describe it to be India's greatest infrastructure project ever undertaken.
Right, and militarily it would be akin to what Pearl Harbor is to the US Pacific Fleet.
Yeah. And we've also talked about the reasons for doing so, the reasons for you having a sort of a foot in the door, so to speak, of the international shipping lines that pass under India. And now that you talk about it, that actually makes sense. And once again, we'll try to have a map for people watching us of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and what you were describing, that the shipments move from down south of Sri Lanka and then towards the countries, Singapore, Thailand,
Yes.
etc. So mainland India does not really have that much of a sort of a leverage on those movements unless you have ships that can reach that very quickly.
And I think the process has begun. If you've seen the container terminal, that gigantic transshipment port that is that was inaugurated a few months back in Viringham Port in Kerala. That's a very large transshipment port that was inaugurated there. So there are some moves that are being made over the last couple of years now to realize that fact that, listen, we need to start attracting bigger ships.
Yeah.
Ships are getting bigger because economies of scale is a simple thing, that the bigger a ship, the more cargo it can carry, the more cargo you carry, the less are your shipping costs, that comes down. So that is a reason why countries go in for these massive 1 lakh ton plus ships which carry tens of thousands of containers, and that's the reason that we must attract these kind of ships to our own ports. And the other aspect of this, of course, is the fact that there has been this great awakening, as I call it, over the last 3 years, that suddenly we woke up and realized that 90% of Indian cargo wasn't being ferried on Indian bottoms, Indian ships, Indian flag ships. And we realized that thanks to the Houthis. So if the one thing that the Houthis have done is to make us aware, acutely aware of the fact that we had no control over the nationality of the ships that were bringing cargoes to our shores or exporting our cargo. So you're looking at India, the 4th largest economy in the world, completely at the whims of international shipping lines. Yeah. Simply because we never built our own ships, we never flagged our own ships. You have Indian shipping companies which are minute, which we make like less than 2% of the world's ships that are ever made. Less than 1%. We are not even a percent. That is how tiny our shipbuilding is. And this is ironic because we have a navy that's really powerful. It's 130 ships, warships. We are building them very quickly. We just commissioned 2 of them recently, last month in August. We built an aircraft carrier. But when it comes to the merchant shipping, space, we aren't building enough merchant ships. It's China that's building them, South Korea, Japan, of course. Even the United States isn't building them. And I think this is a fallout of this whole 20-year thing that you had 20 years back when this whole world was flat kind of thing, where the US was outsourcing across the world. And, now today the geopolitics has flipped. You're talking of nearshoring. Everybody wants to make everything themselves. And, the trade, what it was 20 years back, it's not the case anymore. You have the rise of China. So all these geopolitical factors, the rise of Trump, geopolitics has changed, and this whole thing of the US making cheap goods overseas and then shipping them back to the United States, that itself has undergone a fundamental change. And because of the way geopolitics has unfolded in the last couple of years, particularly after the pandemic, is forcing us to reassess our strategies, that you start building your own ships, because you never know that tomorrow some country might come and enforce a blockade around the Indian mainland and say, I'm not going to allow any ships to enter or leave peninsular India. What do you do then? Yeah. You don't have your own ships. Yeah. So these kind of critical vulnerabilities was something that were never thought of. And it goes down to something as important rather, as a jet engine. It's only when someone says, oh, I'm sorry, there are supply chain issues, we are not going to be able to deliver your jet engine, then we realized, oh my God, we should never have closed the Kaveri engine in 2014. We should have gone on with it. We should have persevered till the time we came to a Mark II or a Mark III. That was your 78 kilonewton thrust engine. So this is... thanks to all these wake-up calls that we've seen in the last 5 years, we're suddenly realizing that the world is not the, rosy picture that we were painted, that we were given a vision of 20, 25 years back.
Yeah. Excellent point about Indian flagships, because that's something actually that's always struck me when I'm on the news floor and I'm covering an incident of a fire or anything else on board a cargo ship that has Indian sailors involved. And I always wondered, but bhai, ship to Indian hai hi nahi. Indian uspe kaam kar rahe, but where are your Indian ships? I've never actually come across one single instance of an Indian flag ship being under distress.
There are a few. There are Shipping Corporation of India has a few. But they're just few and far between.
Yeah.
It's again one, it makes more economical sense for you to have foreign flagship. You just charter these ships and all. But then what do you do in an emergency?
Exactly.
That's what we realized when the Houthis shut off the Bab el-Mandab, and they said that we are only going to allow, we're going to attack all countries that have ties with Israel, right? So they try to enforce a maritime blockade. And that's when you realize, listen, today it was the Bab el-Mandab, tomorrow it could be the Indian subcontinent. Some foreign power might just come up, land off our shores. Someone with a large navy with multiple carrier battle groups could land up. No prizes for guessing which one it could be, which of the two options it could be. And they say, listen, we don't like you very much. We don't like your government very much. So therefore, we're going to enforce a maritime blockade. So please do as we say. And we don't have any option then. And your trade is going to suffer. And as it is, you're so dependent on the oceans for your commerce because you have no landward trading routes because of all the disputes you have on the western border, on the northern border, and of course now in the eastern border. So today you are primarily an ocean-going country. You have no open borders, no area that you can sail unhindered but for the seas. And that is why these projects become so much more important and in fact critical to the Indian economy.
Yeah. Don't give the grand person sitting in that grand White House idea, Sandeep. That's that's a great idea.
Or in Beijing for that.
Yeah, to put some leverage on India. Let me just send one of my fleets over there.
Or two of my fleets, or 3 or 4.
Yeah, and you won't have the Russians over here to help because they are caught up in their own wars.
It's not 1971 again, Dave. We have to fight our own battles now.
Fight our own battles. That is true. Fight our own battles, which is exactly what we're trying to do. A couple of last points, Sandeep. One is something that also happened a week or so ago, something linked to what we've talked about, is India wants to be part of what's known as the Malacca Straits Patrol.
Yeah.
Right now, it's been run by Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand.
Right.
Obvious candidates because they are the ones around that strait.
Yeah.
India wants to be part of it. Now, one of my questions was why, but now it does that questions makes no sense because we've discussed exactly why. So that's sort of redundant. But what I want to ask you is it possible? Like, do you think it's a practical request or what is it? Because in the world of geopolitics, you don't make such requests unless there's some backroom talk already happened about ki kuch to is pe hoga, right? So do you think this is actually a serious request that's actually going to see the light of day? And obviously, China's going to be very pissed about this, I'm guessing.
Well, Dave, what you just said is a very slow shift, a maritime shift, a strategic shift of India looking away from the West, now more towards the East. Our focus on the West remains. The West is very critical. The Western Seaboard, for instance, you have one of our largest oil refineries there, Jamnagar. Yeah. You have the Pakistan Navy there, just off Jamnagar. And of course, Pakistan remains a problem on the Western shores. You have all our oil and energy that comes from West Asia. That's very critical. A lot of our oil is sourced, 40-50% of it comes from West Asia. So our focus remains on the West. But now what we're looking at is that increasingly there is an eastward focus. Yeah. Over the last couple of years, now what you're seeing, for instance, is that those 2 ships, the 2 frontline frigates, Udaygiri and Himgiri that were commissioned. They were commissioned and they were home ported in Visakhapatnam. That's very interesting. For the first time, you have 2 very critical frontline assets being based there. You have the other Shivalik class that are already operating there. So there's a very conscious eastward shift in India's maritime security policy where you're looking at not just warships, submarines as well, but also the aircraft carrier Vikrant is going to be moving there very shortly. So you'll have 1 carrier on the east and 1 on the west. But you're looking at basing more warships. And my guess is that in the next couple of years, when the Andaman, the Great Nicobar port project, increases in shape and size, you will see more warships being based there. And now, coming to your point about the joint patrolling with Singapore and Indonesia, you have to have very strong friendship with these countries there, which are close to the Malacca Straits, primarily because you also want to tell them, allay their fears that a big port project like that is not going to take business away from them. It is a project that everybody can benefit from. I think that is something that the government really needs to convey to them that this needs to be a shared port. Like, for instance, Singapore port is the property of this government of Singapore, but everybody around it benefits. It's not just Singapore, it is Malaysia, it's Indonesia, Philippines, all the countries, India also, because it's so important. Two ship, there's a ship movement in Singapore every 2 minutes. That's how important that port is. Now, the idea is that Galathea Bay will eventually get there 3, 4, 5 decades from now, but it should be a project that all the neighbors benefit from it. Just as our outlook, our maritime outlook is not one of threatening people or, flexing our muscles at sea or intimidating neighbors or anything of that. And that is one reason why this joint patrolling for the Indian Navy to become the preferred partner of choice. And you only have to look back at the tsunami of 2004, when the Indian Navy was the first responder there to all of these areas, Banda Aceh and all those places which were shattered by the tsunami. Despite losing our own bases and personnel in Andamans, we were the first to reach out with a hand of friendship to all of those countries there. So this is India basically doing the Indian thing, which is to render aid, assistance, and to indicate to all of these countries that we are your preferred security partner. Don't forget that we may be 1,400, the mainland may be 1,400 kilometers away, but our territory is just about 60 nautical miles away from you. Yeah. And we are building this great port, this base, and in the next couple of years, we're going to be there, right there. So this is us laying the grounds for what will eventually become a very large base and more or less a permanent presence. And you're also, in a sense, Dev, you're looking at the way the PLA Navy is growing. At the rate that they are, in the next couple of years, you will have a permanent presence of the PLA Navy here in much larger numbers than they are presently based. Today, the Indian Ocean Squadron is a couple of warships. Tomorrow, it could be larger with more aircraft carriers. So you're actually thinking ahead, moving ahead, and pre-positioning yourself for a time when you will compete with China in this Eastern battle space in a way that you will present options not just to the Navy but also to the political leadership that we have these certain options. In case things go south on the land frontiers, we have maritime options. And those options are very well known to the government and of course to the Navy against the Chinese, the PLA Navy in the south and the Far East. Of course, it is going to be a battle. But the fact is that navies, by presenting, by force projection, by presenting all of these options, they induce worry, they induce a kind of a deterrent impact on the adversary, that he will not move in a certain way because he sees that you're already there. So it's a game of chess. Exactly like in a game of chess, all the pieces are transparent. This is our big chess move into the Eastern battle space, as you can call it.
Yeah, a massive chess move. And actually, in fact, I wanted to talk more about the Andaman Nicobar Islands. The idea of turning that into sort of a aircraft carrier. The experiment that began there in 2003 of having India's only tri-services command, the only non-strategic tri-services command. But I don't think we have time left for that because this project itself, the sheer vastness of it, I had sort of underappreciated before we talked about this. So I think we'll end it there. Thanks, Sandeep. Fantastic chat. Learned many things that I did not know about before we began this recording. So thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, Dev.
Yeah. And thanks to all our listeners and viewers. That's it for this week's Defense Dose. For more, tune in next week. Till then, stay safe and do not cross any boundaries with that passport. Bye-bye.